The blood on our family's hands should have been enough to keep us apart. But as the storm raged outside and his hands gripped my waist, I realized that hatting him was the only lie I couldn't tell anymore. In the city of Valerius, two names carried the weight of an empire, Thorne and Sterling. For 3 generations, we had been at each other's throats. My father, Marcus Sterling, had raised me on stories of the Thornes' greed and betrayal. To me, Tyler Thorne wasn't just a man. He was a monster in a tailored suit, the living embodiment of everything I was taught to loathe. I stood at the edge of the rooftop gala, gripping my champagne flute so hard I thought the glass might shatter. Across the crowded terrace, I saw him, Tyler Thorne. He was taller than I remembered, his presence cutting through the crowd like a blade. When his dark eyes caught mine, he didn't look away. He didn't sneer. He simply inclined his head, a silent challenge that made my skin prickle with a heat I didn't want to acknowledge. "Diane," a voice hissed beside me. It was my brother, Julian. "Don't even look at him. Father wants us at the table. The merger talks are failing and it's Tyler's fault. He's squeezing our supply lines." I nodded, tearing my gaze away, but I could still feel the phantom weight of his stare on my back. I hated him for what his family did to mine. I hated him for the way he dominated the market. But as I walked away, a treacherous thought entered my mind. Why did the monster have eyes that looked so hauntingly lonely? The gala was supposed to be a celebration of the city's future, but the air felt heavy with the scent of an impending storm. The clouds were rolling in from the coast, dark and bruised. Little did I know that by midnight, the war between our families would become the least of my worries. The elevator doors opened, and as I stepped inside to head to my car, a hand blocked the sensor. Tyler Thorne stepped in beside me, and the world suddenly felt far too small. The silence in the elevator was suffocating. I stared straight ahead, my heart thundering against my ribs like a trapped bird. Tyler didn't speak. He just stood there, his scent, sandalwood and expensive rain, filling the small space. Suddenly, the lights flickered. A violent jolt shook the car, and with a sickening metallic screech, we came to a dead halt. The emergency lights kicked on, casting the elevator in an eerie, dim crimson. "You have to be kidding me," I whispered, pressing the call button repeatedly. No answer, only the muffled roar of the wind outside the building. "It's the storm," Tyler said, his voice a deep, calm rumble that vibrated in my chest. "The main power grid must have gone down." "Stay on your side, Thorne," I snapped, my voice trembling with a mix of fear and old-fashioned spite. "I don't want your help, and I certainly don't want to be in here with you." He let out a short, dry laugh and leaned against the mirrored wall, crossing his arms. "Do you truly think I planned this, Diane? To be stuck in a metal box with a woman who looks at me like I'm the plague? Trust me, I have better things to do with my evening." I turned to face him, my eyes flashing. "Your family ruined us, Tyler. You're currently trying to bankrupt my father. Don't act like we're just two strangers having a bad night." He took a step toward me, his shadow looming over me. "Your father isn't an innocent man, Diane, and if you knew half the truths I've uncovered, you wouldn't be standing there defending a ghost." "Liar," I breathed. He moved closer, pinning me between his body and the control panel. He was so close I could feel the heat radiating off him. "Look at me and tell me you truly hate me, Diane. Not because your father told you to, but because you do." I looked up at him, ready to scream every insult I knew. But as our eyes met in the red light, the words died in my throat. I didn't see a monster. I saw a man who looked just as tired of the fighting as I was. The temperature in the elevator began to drop as the building's climate control failed. I shivered, rubbing my arms, my silk dress offering no protection. Tyler noticed, and without a word, he began to shed his suit jacket. "I don't want it," I said stubbornly, even as my teeth chattered. "Take the jacket, Diane. Dying of hypothermia to spite a thorn is a bit dramatic, even for you." He stepped forward and draped the heavy wool over my shoulders. It was warm from his body, and despite myself, I leaned into the comfort of it. We sat down on the floor of the elevator, the space between us barely an inch. The storm outside sounded like a war zone, but inside, the world was quiet. "Why do you do it?" I asked softly, the darkness making it easier to be honest. The supply lines, the hostile takeovers. Is the Thorne Empire not big enough for you? Tyler leaned his head back against the wall, closing his eyes. My father left me a mountain of debt and a list of enemies he created. I'm not trying to destroy the Sterlings, Diane. I'm trying to save my own people from drowning in the mess he left behind. Your father's supply lines were tied to a corrupt firm that was skimming from both of us. I cut them to protect the city, not to hurt you. I looked at him in shock. My father had told me Tyler was doing it out of pure malice. Why didn't you say anything? Would you have believed me, or would you have run back to Marcus Sterling and told him exactly where my weaknesses were? He turned his head to look at me, his gaze intense. We've been taught to be soldiers in a war we never chose, Diane. Don't you ever get tired of the uniform? I looked down at my hands, every single day. In that moment, the barrier between us didn't just crack, it vanished. We weren't a Sterling and a Thorne. We were just two people tired of carrying the weight of the past. He reached out, his hand hovering near my face before his fingers finally brushed my jaw. The touch was hesitant, almost reverent. You were never supposed to be part of the hate, he whispered. The friction of the night had reached its breaking point. As Tyler's hand lingered on my face, the years of suppressed curiosity and hidden glances ignited into a fire I couldn't extinguish. I didn't pull away. Instead, I leaned into his palm, my breath hitching as his thumb traced the line of my lower lip. If we do this, I whispered, my voice thick with a sudden, overwhelming longing, there's no going back. We become the traitors they always feared we were. I'd rather be a traitor with you than a loyalist in an empty house, Tyler replied, his voice a low, raw growl. He leaned in, and when our lips finally met, it wasn't the tentative kiss of a first date. It was a collision. It was the sound of 1,000 chains snapping at once. Every ounce of the hatred I had carried for him transformed into a desperate, hungry passion. I tangled my fingers in his dark hair, pulling him closer, as if I could melt into his skin. The elevator, once a prison, became a sanctuary. In the dim red glow of the emergency lights, we shed the symbols of our families, the sterling pearls, the Thorne cufflinks, until there was nothing left but us. When we made love, it was a rebellion. It was a declaration that our bodies belonged to us, not the legacies we inherited. Every touch was an apology for the years we spent apart, and every gasp was a promise for a future we hadn't even dared to imagine. As the storm began to settle outside, and we lay tangled together on the floor of the elevator, draped in his suit jacket, I realized that I didn't hate Tyler Thorne. I loved him. And that was far more dangerous than any war our fathers had ever started. What happens when the doors open? I asked, resting my head on his chest. Then, Tyler said, kissing the top of my head, we fight for us, not for them. The power flickered back to life with a low hum, and the elevator began its slow descent to the lobby. The harsh, white fluorescent lights felt like a physical blow, exposing the reality of what we had done. We quickly dressed, the silence between us now charged with a new kind of anxiety. Diane, Tyler said, catching my hand just as the doors chimed. My office tomorrow night, 9:00 p.m. We need a plan before your father or my board hears about this. I nodded, my heart in my throat. As the doors opened, the lobby was crawling with security and emergency crews. I saw my brother, Julian, standing near the entrance, looking frantic. I pulled my hand away from Tyler, the cold weight of my last name returning to my shoulders. Diane, thank God, Julian shouted, rushing over. He glared at Tyler, his fists clenching. What did he do to you? Did he hurt you? I'm fine, Julian, I said, my voice sounding distant even to my own ears. We were just stuck. He didn't do anything. I felt Tyler's gaze on me, steady and silent. I didn't look back. I followed Julian to the car, but as we drove away, I looked in the rearview mirror. Tyler was standing on the sidewalk, his hands in his pockets, watching the car disappear. That night, my father was waiting in the study. He looked older, more haggard. The Thorne boy trapped you, didn't he? Using the storm to intimidate a Sterling. I've already leaked the story to the press. By morning, the city will know he's a predator. Father, no, I gasped. He didn't do anything, he helped me. My father narrowed his eyes, a cold, calculating look entering his gaze. You're a Sterling, Diane. You don't defend the enemy, you destroy them. Remember whose side you're on. I spent the next day in a state of constant panic. The headlines were exactly what my father promised. Sterling heiress trapped by ruthless Thorne CEO. The public was calling for Tyler's resignation. My father was using our forbidden night as a weapon to finally crush the Thorne empire. At 9:00 p.m., I slipped out of the house, taking a back entrance to avoid the paparazzi. I drove to Thorne Tower, my heart racing. The building was dark, but the top floor was glowing. I found Tyler in his office, staring at the city lights. He looked like he hadn't slept. On his desk was a legal document, a resignation letter. You can't sign that, I said, closing the door behind me. Your father won, Diane, he said, his voice flat. If I stay, the board will vote me out anyway. This way, I can at least save some of the employees' pensions before the company is liquidated. He lied, Tyler. I tried to tell him, but he wouldn't listen. He's using me. I walked over to him, taking his face in my hands. I won't let him do this. I have proof. Proof of what? My father has been falsifying the records of that corrupt firm you mentioned. He was the one skimming the money, Tyler, not them. He used the Thorne name as a cover for years. I found the files in his safe this afternoon. Tyler looked at me, a flicker of hope returning to his eyes. If we release those, it won't just save my company. It will destroy your father. You'll lose everything, Diane. The Sterling name will be dragged through the dirt. The Sterling name is built on a lie, I whispered. I'd rather be a nobody with you than a Sterling with a guilty conscience. We didn't wait for morning. Tyler and I drove to the Sterling estate together. We walked into the study where my father and Julian were celebrating their victory with expensive cigars. When they saw Tyler, my father stood up, his face turning a deep, angry purple. How dare you bring that filth into this house, Diane? Get out, Thorne, before I call the police. The police are already on their way, father, I said, stepping forward. I pulled the flash drive from my pocket and held it up. I know about the offshore accounts. I know you were the one stealing from the supply lines, not the Thornes. I have the signatures. I have the dates. Julian looked at my father, his face turning pale. Father, tell me she's lying. My father didn't answer. He looked at the flash drive, then at me, his eyes full of a cold, predatory fury. You would betray your own blood for a boy you met in an elevator. I gave you everything, Diane. I built this for you. You built it on the bodies of your enemies and the lies you told your children, I shouted. It's over. My father lunged for the flash drive, but Tyler stepped in front of me, his height and strength an immovable wall. Don't touch her, Marcus. It's over. The files have already been sent to the district attorney's office via an encrypted server. There's nowhere to hide. The sound of sirens began to wail in the distance, getting closer and closer. My father sank into his chair, the cigar falling from his fingers. The war was over. But as the police arrived, I realized the cost was my entire family. The following weeks were a whirlwind of court dates, public scandals, and the total collapse of the Sterling brand. My father was indicted on multiple counts of fraud and embezzlement. Julian, unable to face the shame, moved across the country to start a quiet life under a different name. I was left with nothing. The estate was seized, my bank accounts frozen, and my friends vanished as soon as the Sterling name became toxic. I was sitting in a small, empty park one evening, wondering where I was going to sleep that night, when a familiar black sedan pulled up to the curb. Tyler stepped out, looking more relaxed than I had ever seen him. I've been looking for you, he said, sitting down on the bench beside me. I didn't want to bother you, I whispered. Your company is finally thriving. You don't need the Sterling scandal dragging you down. I don't care about the company, Tyler. I care about the woman who saved it, and me. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a key. I bought a small house, not a manor, not a tower, just a house. It has a garden and a view of the river. Tyler, I have nothing to give you. You gave me the truth, Diane. That's more than I've had my whole life. He pressed the key into my hand. Come home with me, for real this time. The house was perfect. It was filled with light and the scent of the river. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like a Sterling. I felt like Diane. Tyler and I spent our days building something new, a life that wasn't defined by bank balances or family trees. He helped me start my own design firm, and I helped him turn Thorne Industries into a company that actually helped the city. One evening, as we sat on the back porch watching the sunset, Tyler turned to me. He didn't have a massive diamond or a rehearsed speech. He just had a simple gold band. The world expects us to hate each other, he said, his voice soft. Our fathers would be rolling in their graves if they saw us now, but I don't want to live a day without you. Will you marry me, Diane? Not to merge empires, but to build a family. I looked at the ring, then at the man I was supposed to hate. I thought about the elevator, the storm, and the night we chose each other over everything else. Yes, I said, a smile breaking across my face. 1,000 times yes. We were married a week later in the garden of our new house. There were no cameras, no paparazzi, and no Sterlings or Thornes. Just two people who had found love in the middle of a war zone. A year had passed since the night in the elevator. My father was still in prison, and Julian occasionally sent letters from the coast, telling me he was finally happy. Tyler and I were standing on the same rooftop where the gala had been held a year prior. This time, the event wasn't a celebration of greed. It was the opening of the Thorne Sterling Foundation, a charity dedicated to helping families affected by corporate corruption. You look beautiful, Tyler whispered, wrapping his arm around my waist. I feel free, I said, leaning into him. The city lights twinkled below us, but they didn't feel like a prize anymore. They were just lights. As the band began to play a slow song, Tyler led me to the center of the terrace. We danced as the first drops of rain began to fall, the same kind of storm that had trapped us a year ago. People are still talking, I teased, nodding toward a group of socialites whispering in the corner. The forbidden lovers, the enemies who turned. Let them talk, Tyler said, leaning down to kiss me. They can call it forbidden, they can call it a scandal, but I just call it home. As the rain began to pour, we didn't run for cover. We stayed in the middle of the terrace, dancing in the storm, finally, perfectly at peace. The war was over, the hate was gone, and the only thing left was the love that had been born in the dark.